So we just heard Kerry Bennet talk about the 2016 wireless auction, 600 megahertz spectrum, very complicated. In fact, I think Jill Canfield said it's the most complicated auction the FCC has undertaken. You've just read through the document, and why don't you share some of your insight about this auction?
Well, I think from a rural carrier perspective, in order to take advantage of the low band spectrum, which is really great for rural consumers and makes it travel a lot further and do a lot of different things with the spectrum in a rural environment, we need to make sure that these rural carriers are able to participate and understand what the rules and regulations are going to be. And in this particular auction, there's three components to it. There's a reverse auction where the broadcasters sell back their spectrum, and then there's a repacking of the broadcasters into lower band spectrum, and then a freeing up of the spectrum for a normal forward-looking auction. And all of these are taking place simultaneously. So that's where the convolutedness of the auction processes is going to come into play. One of the interesting things is we call this the incentive auction because we're trying to incentivize broadcasters to participate. And one of the things that we learned from a recent public notice is that it appears to be at least one station that is worth, in theory, $900 million. And if that one station, and we don't know what that station is, moves, then it factors into how much value all the other stations will be set, their price will be set at the high price, and the broadcasters have to determine how much lower they're willing to go before they exit. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that in the broadcast television world, most of broadcasting station programming is not viewed over the air. And so the need for spectrum by a broadcaster is not as necessary as it used to be in the past, back in the 50s. So getting them to move and understand that they'll still be viewed and that they'll still have market share is where we have to get the broadcasters to go. And this particular auction is not looking at the value of their stations based on their market share, it's looking at the values of their stations based on the freeing up of the UHF bands for the mobile carriers. I could go on and on about this, and if you have specifics, I'd be happy to.
No, it's fascinating to me because in the end, it could end up being worth a lot of money. If it isn't, then the spectrum auction doesn't happen. They kind of go back to ground zero, right?
Right, or we don't clear as much of the spectrum that we need, and we have less opportunity in this band in the short term, and possibly, as I said in the conference, that looking forward, if this only brings back maybe 30 or 40 megahertz of spectrum, we may be looking at another one of these if Congress sets it in motion again to clear the spectrum later down the road when maybe the broadcasters are a little more comfortable with exiting.
Well, one of the things that, it's obviously going to be a big windfall, and some of that money is going to go back to the broadcasters, right? Some of it presumably would go back to people like myself who are using this microphone because it's in the affected band. But how much, it is, as you pointed out, it's the public spectrum. How much of that money goes back to the public? Any idea?
Well, I think that's what remains to be seen because we don't know how much is being sold yet. But ideally, the broadcasters will set their price. I think we know on the high end what one station is going to be valued at, theoretically. But then where the rest of the money goes, we know that $1.75 billion has been targeted for the relocating the broadcasters down in the spectrum, repacking them, helping take care of some of the microwave issues and that sort of thing. A lot of it should go into the U.S. Treasury, and that will be to fund a whole bunch of other government programs that the U.S. government has. So in theory, it does come back to the people.
Well, it kind of leads also to, we just heard a presentation from the CEA and the value of unlicensed spectrum. And I'm just wondering from a political standpoint, clearly the NAB is in with the courts, but from a political standpoint, do you think there could be a movement by Congress to say, wait a second, maybe auctions aren't the most efficient way to use the spectrum?
Well, auctions aren't the most efficient way to license a spectrum, or I think
unlicensed is a better way.
Yeah, so unlicensed. I think there's always going to be a need for unlicensed. I think the problem is when you put too much into unlicensed, you create interference, and if you want to make sure you don't have interference, you need to protect it through a licensing mechanism. But over time, who knows? Technology may take care of interference issues for us, and we don't need an FCC or licensing spectrum, and it all becomes unlicensed. But that's going to be based on technology and where things go in the future. So you and I may not be having this discussion, and we all may be out of jobs.
One thing about that, though, too, that these auctions, as a subtle point you brought up, was that these auctions basically are forever. It's kind of perpetuity.
Well, you can always, when you think about it, the PCS bands that everybody has been licensed in to bring the first 2G, now 3G, and on to 4G, that used to be microwave, and that was cleared, and we paid to clear that band. So in theory, if something greater and better than mobile broadband comes down the road, 30, 40 years from now, we could be cleared out of this band.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's always the task of the FCC and the U.S. government is to make the best use of the spectrum, whatever that use may be. And as technology evolves and changes, we may have better uses.
Well, and they definitely did a yeoman's work of putting together a lot of scenarios, right?
Yes, they did.
Well, Carrie, thank you very much for your explanation, and we could go on for days on this topic, I'm sure.
Yeah, we could.
Operators, if you haven't already, register for the CO to Data Center event at ITS Fiber. It is next month, right after NTCA's Telecom Executive Forum in sunny and warm Florida.